senhores, boa tarde.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We are going to start the opening of the event. On behalf of the general coordination of this event, I greet everyone, participants, volunteers from Conscientiocentric Institution. This year, this event will be only online. Welcome everyone to the 17th Penta Forum and 14th International Meeting of Penta Practitioners. Now we are going to present the components of this table. We have the General Coordinator of CEAEC, Roberto Lyon, the coordinators from XVII Tenepes, Flávio Amado and Silva Belo, the General Secretary of UNICIM, Poliana Colucci, and the coordinators of this event, Lauisa Barbosa and Sonia Diniz. So now we are going to start with Roberto Lyon. So good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you on behalf of CEAEC, which has been the pioneer organizing the Penta Forum. And today we have the participation from the XVII Tenepes, the Conscientiocentric Institution, and all the efforts around the specialty Tenepes, Pentology. And this moment, we dedicate this event to gather the researchers to see the most recent response and experiences, which is the basis for conscientiology. And we find in Penta one of the main focus. It is one of the most important techniques for all of us. So I wish you all an excellent event. We are now at the 17th edition of this annual event at the end of the year. And although we had all this turbulence from the recent times with pandemic and a lot of difficulties and distortions regarding misunderstanding and situations of all kinds. So we see how much this technique brings us together and place ourselves more centered on our main objective, which is interassistance. So this is a very special moment to celebrate, and we wish you all an excellent event and welcome. And we hope that next year we have the event on site.
Silvia?
So, good afternoon, everyone. I also want to wish you all a very good event. And for those who have participated before, you know how important this event is for us, Penta practitioners. So we have this event with many reports and many articles to be presented, and we learn a lot from the experiences from our colleagues. So I wish you all a very good event and good benefit and from the new information here. So welcome everyone and a good event for all of us.
Flávio?
So I would like also to say thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in this big event. As mentioned by Roberto, this is a partnership between XVII Tenepes and CEAEC. And for me, it's becoming very clearly how important the CEAEC campus is important for Penta. So from my understanding, this mega event bringing together many Penta practitioners from all over the world with their experiences and based on the principle of disbelief, which is the basis for our experimentation, And when we have this exchange of experiences from different parts of the planet, it's a big event. I also would like to say thank you very much to UNICE for their support. 17 years shows the maturity of this event. So welcome everyone, and we hope to have a great event. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this important event. This year, following the process we had along these 2 last years, it's very important to talk about Penta. Under this critical situation the planet is in terms of assistential demands. I want to remind yourself that Penta is regard this epicentrism, consciential epicentrism, and we place ourselves in a place of assisted more than assisted one. But the people accessing the consciential paradigm and assume this commitment with Penta start to develop this consciential epicentrism. So the person becomes the main pillar for this process and for the self-research, conscientiological self-research, and this gives strength to the consciential paradigm because the basis is self-experimentation, and this makes a big difference in terms of interassistance. It's a moment we exteriorize our energies, but we also talk about the clarification task, which is the basis of our assistential process within the consciential paradigm. So I consider it very important, one of the most important events of our community, and I hope you can benefit from all these experiences shared by the researchers and their finds and the results achieved using this technique proposed by Valente. So make good use of this participation. So participating in this forum is a very peculiar condition for assistance. Here we exchange experience, knowledge, and the results from our self-research and from our experience. It's a very special opportunity to share our knowledge. And together with this, to be at the coordination of the forum is a very important challenge for me as a Penta practitioner acting in this max mechanism, in the interassistential max mechanism. So I would like to say thank you very much for this opportunity, and also I thank Malaise for her patience to share with me this coordination. So thank you very much, Sonia. I also would like to say thank you very much to you, Sonia, for all the exchange of experiences and the work we did together. And I would like to say thank you very much, CEAEC. We are at the coordination, and I'm leaving the coordination now after 2 years, and this has been a very good experience in terms of interassistance and going deeper into my self-research and recycling. So I would like to say thank you also to the extra-physical helps, because they keep this work. They are very direct, they are present all the time, they are very objective, and they guide us and they support us with what is better for interassistance. So I would like to say thank you to all the team from CEAEC, the transmission team, translation, the Conscientiological. So everybody who contributed, and especially I want to say thank you to the team close to us, helping us during all the weeks during the year. We had a meeting every week to bring today our best, to organize this event in the best way we could. And the materpensene of this year, which is this interaction between self-research and Penta technique, this year we had the highest number of publications, and this shows that the authors contributed a lot to the development of this specialty. And this is an assistance with great impact. So thank you very much to the helpers and to the authors for their dedication by writing and presenting your work. And all the participants here, I wish you a very good event. And we hope that you can use this moment to qualify your Penta practice. And if you are not yet a Penta practitioner, you can also benefit to plan in a more safe and good way your future Penta. So thank you very much. So we declare the 17th Penta Forum and the 14th International Meet of Penta Practitioners open. We thank you all, coordinators, and we invite you to attend the opening conference of this event with Ivo Valente, with the subject Self-Conscientiotherapy, Penta Synergy. Ivo Valente is a psychologist and he's graduated in history. He's volunteering in conscientiology since 1991, instructor since 1996, conscientiotherapy since 2001, Epicon since 2019, verbophotographer since 2020, and Penta practitioner since 2000. So please, Ivo Valente, and we will have as mediators the two volunteers, Luisa Barbosa and Sonia Diniz, to help us with the debates. So thank you very much for your participation. And it's an honor for me to be here to open this forum, this event, which is a tradition in conscientiology, considering the interassistance promoted by it. And it's not just here in the Cognopolis, in our community, but we can say that today we have the online version of this event and we can reach many parts of this planet. So thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for the team from XVII Tenepes and people organizing the forum. Thank you very much for this invitation, and I hope to be at a good level for this event. We are going to talk about the self-conscientiotherapy and Penta synergy. So I'm going to share my screen with you. I hope everything goes well. So I would like to inform some points. You can send your questions by the Q&A, and some questions will come from the YouTube channel. And so the title is Self-Conscientiotherapy Penta Synergy. I developed earlier one verbet, synergies between Penta and conscientiotherapy. And after this verbet, we had many debates about it and some activities at the OIC, which is the International Association of Conscientiotherapy. So we have some activities related to Penta. We have one activity which is for 4 Sundays, and this is an immersion to qualify the Holocene for Penta. And from my experiences and from my self-research and talking with Louise, we came to this title, which is the Self-Conscientiotherapy Penta Synergy. So the person qualifying himself through self-conscientiotherapy will improve the Holocene of his or her Penta practice. So now it's important to talk about conscientiotherapeuticology to organize the basis we are going to talk here. I'm a conscientiotherapist since 2001, I started. So now in December, I complete 2 decades as a conscientiotherapist. So conscientiotherapeuticology is a specialty from conscientiology applied to specific systematic theoretical studies of research or para-research, of experiences, of our experiences, of treatment, relief, and remission of consciential disorders, pathologies, parapathologies, using resources and techniques derived from the approach of an integral, holosomatic, multidimensional, multi-existential consciousness. So this specialty is the specialty we are working at the OIC. So I talked about conscientiotherapeuticology, and we should define what conscientiotherapy is. It's a set of methods, techniques, and procedures derived from this specialty, and we can say from conscientiology as a whole, hetero or self-applied to the treatment and prophylaxis of consciential disorders, pathologies, and parapathologies, considering this integral approach of a consciousness through the consciential paradigm view. So the consciential paradigm is the basis for everything we are going to discuss here, as well as all the events from conscientiology. So there is a very important aspect now. Conscientiotherapy is divided into 2 fields. We have the heteroconscientiotherapy and the self-conscientiotherapy. The first one, heteroconscientiotherapy, is promoted by OIC, at their OIC. So we have this clinical conscientiotherapy. So it happens in our institution, but we also have self-conscientiotherapy. When the person, independently of having a conscientiotherapist, independent to be a psychologist, the person will apply the resource from conscientiotherapy. So the consciousness will be her own conscientiotherapist. So there is an application of resource for herself. So we are here to potentialize the self-conscientiotherapy of Penta practitioners and also the ones who plan to start Penta, to help them to qualify their Penta happening now or for a future practice. And here there is a very important point. Not always the person is able to overcome some disease or some pathologies alone. certain problems, certain emotional situations. Not always is possible for the person to overcome these situations alone. There is no problem from the evolutionary point of view to ask for help. I think this is a very important point. We are talking about psychology, conventional psychology. We have this concept that people searching for consciential therapies treatment is because this person has a big problem. But here, we should not consider that people searching for help from OIC has big problems and very serious problems. Conscientiotherapy, as well as the conventional psychology, is here to help people. So we are going to focus now here in this clinical conscientiotherapy. If the person is already a Penta practitioner and this person feels that something is not going very well and there is a limit, something could go better. We can start from the energies, for example, and the person is not able to perceive this in a very clear way. So the conscientiotherapy can help. We cannot say that this will be 100% in all cases, but conscientiotherapy can help people a lot. And many conscientiotherapies can amplify your perception, and from this amplification of your perception, you can see certain situations which will facilitate your practice and qualification of your practice. And the ones attending this conscientiotherapy, we call them evolution. And we have people who never attended or searched for this kind of assistance, but we should also mention that anybody can develop this self-conscientiotherapy. And we will talk a bit more about this soon. So, in the case of heteroconscientiotherapy, we should mention that today all conscientiotherapies at OIC are Penta practitioners. I think even all the volunteers, even the ones who are not yet conscientiotherapists. So the Penta from these conscientiotherapists act in a very important way for the institutional interassistance. And as mentioned before, Penta is the central point for interassistance for all CIs, all conscientiocentric institutions. It doesn't matter if we're talking about IIPC or CEAEC, Penta is the central point. Penta has this centralization in terms of interassistance developed by all the conscientiocentric institutions. And for all the more than 20 sites we have in our community. So Penta is a central point of interassistance. I would say that without Penta, many things we do would be much more limited because the self-intrusion would be much more difficult. So Penta is fundamental for this conscientiocentric work. So in terms of self-conscientiotherapy, so it's the systematic self-application of holosomatic and pluri-existential anamnesis with the purpose of establishing the diagnosis to cope with the overcoming of these pathologies and parapathologies. So, people attending clinical conscientiotherapy or self-conscientiotherapy, they can apply conscientiotherapeutic techniques. So, in the next slide, we have the steps. So, the first step of self-conscientiotherapy is self-investigation. Then we have self-diagnosis, self-confrontation, and self-overcoming. And we are going to talk a bit about each of these steps. So, the self-investigation is when the person starts to research about himself or herself. So, searching to understand how or what is going on. For example, sometimes we see people suffering, something disturbing, or stress, for example. Sometimes this suffering, this stress, is something superficial, showing up, but this stress, the suffering, need to be better investigated, because it can be only a symptom. This stress, no matter in which context of her life, if there is a suffering and something beyond the limits, it's always good to self-investigate in a lucid way. Self-investigation requires lucidity in a healthy manner, in a healthy way. So, if you think you have a problem, you should investigate it further. So, what is behind? Which mechanisms I retrofeed in a way this discomfort? And not all stress, not all stress we have bring negative surprise. Sometimes they bring positive surprise. This is important, so you should not stop this discomfort. And you can know yourself better. So from this self-investigation, the person will reach the self-diagnosis. Self-diagnosis is certainty, a relative certainty about a trait, about something you understand better. I will give you one example that we had in one consultancy, online consultancy we had at OIC. We had one situation with one person, and the person was very disturbed by one situation. And the person was not able to see the situation. At the same time, the person wanted to go deeper into her proexis, but the person was not able to see this situation with clarity. At some point, the person started to perceive that the proudness, the feeling she had to be proud about something was the blocking factor. She was expecting that one person came and asked to forgive because one situation. So this person had a clear difficulty to understand the situation. So in her process, she was not able to see the self-diagnosis was not clear to her. So when she reached this self-diagnosis, she could understand and develop some aspects related to her praxis. So this called our attention. So she was not suffering with the self-diagnosis. So she was, she did reach this self-diagnosis, and this was very positive for her. So a certainty about a mechanism of her consciential process. And if she was angry or disappointed, she could understand why. And the person should see it by herself. And when the person reached this self-diagnosis, in this case, the person did not suffer. It was not self-intrusion, and the person found out a lot of things helping her to interact with other people. Problems she had before and she could not understand before. And from this self-diagnosis, she could understand.
So from this diagnosis, we start to confront the situation. We have to actually do something practical about it. And it can vary a lot from case to case. So a big part of these actions, even in our appointments, personal appointments, it is very clear, and every single time it has an existential character to it. It can involve Penta, but not always. In the case of elders or orphanage, and then sometimes we, instead of the clarity task, we can go and do the consolation task. And there are several aspects of the interassistential aspects that we can act upon, and it can involve recycling ourselves, and several times very often. It's always an existential process. So based on, through the self-confrontation, we can actually go to the self-overcoming of all these pathological aspects of ourselves. So the person that I was giving as an example about the pride, being too proud, that person actually overcame, and that person started doing more assistential acts and started to create a movement and proving that there is a relative self-overcoming process. And so through investigating this pride and in the personality, and starting to self-diagnose and confront the problem, the ideal process is that the person uses the self-overcoming of these negative aspects and start to go back to self-investigation and going through the process all over again. Now, a very interesting point here is the quality of Penta is closely related to the quality of the practitioner's Holocene. I remember that when in the 90s, some of you here will remember what I'm talking about right now. So some of the first hotel. I remember something that Dr. Waldo used to say. Ultimately, the person who is donating energies is the Holocene of the Penta practitioner. Ultimately, I'm going to repeat this, ultimately, the who is donating energy is the Holocene of the Penta practitioner. Something that we have to remember, the quality of our Penta will depend upon the quality of our Holocene. Doing Penta without recycling, intraconsciential recycling, and something is wrong. It's not simply donating energy just for doing it. We have to qualify the energy donation when doing Penta. Not leveling down through the mediocre levels of society. In order to amplify our interassistance, we have to qualify. We cannot stagnate and stop in our advances, intraconsciential advances, successes. If we stop our qualification, all of the same qualification, our Penta will stop as well. It may be obvious for some people, but for some other people, it's not that obvious. So the process here is through the self-conscientiotherapy. The self-conscientiotherapy objects to the improvement of the consciousness by improving the personal Holocene. So the more self-conscientiotherapy aimed at self-desperticity, the better the interassistential effects in Penta. Okay? Self-dispersity, the better the interassistential effects in Penta. The more we walk towards desperticity, something that we can actually reach, it's not that far away. I'm from a time where people from conscientiology, when we talked about desperticity, it was something like we couldn't even reach ever. It was so far away from us. So at the time, we already had a Penta manual, but we used to see a Penta like that and a desperticity like that. But nowadays, it's totally different. This forum is an example of this. So Penta is not a taboo anymore. We are working together in order to make it possible that we can reach self-dispersity, that it is actually something we can conquer, we can fulfill. So self-conscientiotherapy is also to qualify the Holocene. The idea is that the more we qualify our Holocene, we can actually better our Holocenes in order to assist the intruders. The time that we start to think about our conscientiotherapy and our Holocene, This is the type of the Holocene that's very de-intruding. When the conscene with a vicinity very clear and starts to enter and get into the Holocene of Cosmoethics and so on. It also includes a Holocene very reflective in terms of reflecting against the Holocene of intruders. They actually tend to come near us, but to actually receive assistance, not just to intrude and and make us very unstable. So in the International Organization of Conscientiotherapy, we actually go a lot deeper than what we are doing here, but we are giving you some pointers on what we do there. We also have the self-investigation technique. So I asked here a question that's basic. Do you still think badly of someone? Do you still feel annoyed, or do you still feel sad about what people think about you? Dr. Waldo used to say, if the person fights every day, argues every day, people, this type of situation, the person is not actually practicing Penta. We can't say that the Penta of a person like this is actually going well. Something, it's one thing if the person is distracted, if they don't actually realize what's going on, but if the person just turns the face away, they don't want to say even hi, they don't want to talk to someone. If they, this is a situation that tends to be very complicated. The person is actually getting stuck. It's causing the Penta to be stuck. Another technique is the holosomatic checkup technique. So how is my soma? How is my holosoma? Are my energies well? Or what about my mental soma? Do I still daydream? Do I still have a pathological holocene or thothene? So a daydreamer, for instance, the solution for this is actually that the person concentrates, like the focus. Another technique very interesting is the Malaise confrontation technique. Like some subject that makes the person feel bad about it. Like, for instance, if you're talking about the evolutionary duo, partners, why is it actually making that people feel uncomfortable? It could be anything. I'm talking about this exactly, but it could be anything. This bad feeling that may not be an intrusion can actually indicate a sublevel that consciousness is actually living through right now. A problem that we actually have in general in society is that when you're feeling bad about something, we have a tendency that we don't want to think about it. We don't actually want to talk about it. when instead it could be a very good opportunity to better ourselves. So another very important aspect here, so these techniques that we're talking about right now, about self-diagnostic techniques, they can actually be used when you're doing your own self-conscientiotherapy. So like the intention qualification technique. Why am I doing this for right now? Am I doing this with what intentions? Another one is the consciential functioning mechanism description in technique. So when we are, if we are working well our energies, maneuvering our energies, we can actually identify if how our holosome is. So we can establish a relationship between our consciential traits. So the relationship between the traits is actually very helpful if we are trying to identify our functioning mechanism. So another one is the perception of self-justifications technique. So if you start to justify and excuse a lot of actions to yourself, like for instance, if we have to do something very important and they're like, oh, I can't right now because I am very busy with my family, or I have other activities that I should be focusing on. So we have to actually double check and see if it's just not an excuse, or just we're just justifying to ourselves if we need to actually reach upper levels of our self-evolution. We have to be very pay a lot of attention to this aspect. So in 12 minutes, we are going to open for questions. So the action by little things technique, volition technique, talent technique. It is something that will depend on your will. Only it depends on yourself. You will actually take action immediately. So the person is in front of the TV, for instance, and they are watching Netflix or HBO, and then that person feels that they are not, they are just not doing enough right now. They're just watching TV, relaxing. I'm not talking about the person that's just relaxing because needs some time to themselves. No, I'm talking about the person that is actually overdoing the relaxation. So they could be doing something more beneficial, evolutive. The technique of action by priorities. So the person will determine some priorities and will focus on the priorities. Let's say someone, for instance, that decides to start practicing Penta. So that person will focus on that priority. That's the focus, that's the point. So for instance, if you are focused on starting to practice Penta, you have to have a job. Without a job, without an income, it's very hard to actually start practicing Penta. So the priority here is not the Penta, is actually getting a job. Or let's say that someone is very hurt by something that somebody else did. You can actually use the mental screen technique, and you start to insist on the forgiveness process. So here, guys, we have to act. We have to take action. Self-confrontation is action. Now, the fourth technique is the technique for the elaboration of the book of group karmic creditors. This technique, it consists of you elaborating, you creating an inventory of all the human contacts that you've had so far. So you can use a notebook that we actually have even a published notebook for this use. So you will start to compile the name of everybody, starting with your parents' names, your brothers and sisters, and then you will be creating a list of an interassistential, a permanent interassistential list. This technique can help a lot to, especially people that have the problem of being ungrateful. So this technique will help. And even if you have a lot of sorrow, or you feel hurt about the things that people did to you, this technique helps a lot. I have a class that specifically targets this class, this subject, this topic specifically. So we talk about this technique very often. In my case specifically, this technique gave me a before and after Penta. So I was there practicing Penta and doing well, but when I started using this technique, going from people in my family, my group karmic family, and until the volunteers in my CI, it changed, totally changed my Penta. So this is why I always speak about this technique. And even a class that we have in the Autocognitivus, if you have interest, you can ask, you can get the information about it. And we also have the aspect of self-overcoming, overcoming indicators technique. The person themselves, they will have to indicate. Like, for instance, the positive extra-physical euphoria, cosmoethics, healthy, that happiness, that spontaneous happiness, natural happiness that comes from the overcoming of a certain weak trait. So the consciousness is self-confronting and they get a boost of energy. This is the great indicator process. When they have this boost of energy, in that condition specifically, can be an indication of self-overcoming. So we can actually use that energy and that euphoria, that boost of energy, to self-investigate even more, to self-diagnose even more, and overcome even more traits. So we are repeating here all the techniques. So this is my, I'm teaching you guys in a very educational way, separating, but not always it has to be done in this order. So when that person that I was giving you the example about the pride, she didn't just self-diagnose. It was like more, she was doing everything at once. Her energy changed at that moment. So something, when she reached that self-investigation, she saw how much that actually went against her own success, her own fulfillment. So when a self-conscientiotherapy is being well done without intrusion of any type, and the same as the technique of the creditors, the group karmic creditors, they can actually recognize all the problems that they created in the past, all the problematic attitudes where they have some type of responsibility upon. That is extremely motivating. So that person can actually do more assistential acts in order to even resolve more things. So in terms of understanding the self-conscientiotherapy, these are things that are very important. So I'd like to actually talk specifically about greater leadership regarding interassistance to group karmic creditors. Like, for instance, self-disperticity, maybe I can actually see the light in the end of the tunnel, or OFX, no, not. But what helps me really is this technique. Today, I have a very realistic notion. I'm a perception, more realistic perception of my own role in the group karmic mechanism. And when I say group karmic, I'm not talking about just family. I'm talking about every single person that is actually in our group karmic relation. Greater synergism of Penta with the existential program. So we are almost finalizing this to open for questions. So this synergism of Penta with the existential program, this is very important. I've seen several cases of people that actually left their roles as a volunteer in an institution because of something that made them fight, an argument or something, and they left. I've seen several situations like this. They left the institution, and then like a while after, they stopped practicing Penta. People that went through this kind of situation. Folks, Penta needs to be involved with the existential program. Now, Penta, just for Penta, if it's not connected with the realization of the existential program, it doesn't. Something is not going to work. There are future implications, okay?
And now going to the conclusions, I bring some citations from the lexicon. the Penta practitioner is always paradoxically the weakest, least competent piece in the gear of Penta. However, the most indispensable piece. So if we increase our competency and our lucidity, we become a gear helping and minimizing the work from the helpers. So I think it's very important to bring this citation. Penta, interassistentiality theories. This became very clear to me as I started to apply the technique of the book of the creditors. Valdo Vieira was always very careful using some words. When he says functional Penta never remains assistentially inert. So we are reaching now 6 o'clock, and according to our plans, we are going to open now for the questions, for the debate you may have, and if I'm able to answer, then we can discuss. So I'll stop sharing my screen and let's see what we have. So I'm available for the questions. So thank you very much for your presentation. We have one question here from our friend, from Marilux. She has one question. Can you talk more about the consci, who is a conscientiophilic and Penta practitioner? I think these two types of persons are correlated. If the person doesn't like people, doesn't like to interact, it will be very difficult to practice Penta. All conscientiologists should like people. So liking people, interacting with people is something very good. Professionals dealing with health, dealing with people, these professions help a lot to develop this interaction. And not necessarily people linked to psychology or medical science, but if you are linked, for example, to a volunteer work or in a company work, these also help a lot. The book of group comic creditors helped me a lot to observe the people and to develop this sense to like people. There were some aspects from people I interacted in Florianopolis that I did not realize before. Today I see that I recognize and I have gratitude for these people. I could bring more details, but here it's not the case. It's not our objective here, but I hope I could answer your answer. Otherwise, you can bring again your question. So we have here some questions from the room. The first one is from Eliane. I made this self-conscientiotherapy some time ago, and it helped me a lot in the recycling process. How often should I do it again? So you were talking about self-conscientiotherapy. It's something continuously along your life. Afterwards, you will have self-conscientiotherapy. So we should not stop it. This is our intention, our objective. If you were talking about the clinical conscientiotherapy, what we recommend is, it's only a recommendation, because this can vary from person to person, from case to case. But for example, the person comes for intensive assistance here at OIC, for one specific aspect, and the person starts working on this aspect, we recommend this person to return after 6 months. This is very often the case. And then the person starts to remove the layers. So this is one analogy, but this is like an onion. You remove layer by layer. So you do this and you go deeper into other aspects. There are many free activities available. So the person can be linked to this holotocene, not necessarily to this presential assistance or interaction. I think there is one tool very important for OIC, which is these consultancies. But recently, for example, I attended a sequence of these consultancies. So from time to time, going to this process helps a lot. But I don't want to force you to attend this conscientiotherapy. You have to, this should come from your own initiative. So people should not remind the other one about conscientiotherapy. This doesn't happen. This is nonsense. It's also interesting to mention that Penta we have as a daily practice. At the beginning of the Penta, the person will review the day. And at this moment, there will be many aspects to be exploited, to be analyzed. And these are data for self-conscientiotherapy. Another aspect is that self-conscientiotherapy helps in Penta, for Penta practice, and the other way around also. Penta also helps self-conscientiotherapy. It was very good, your point. So from Penta, the person together with the helpers can have some insights related to her own conditions. For example, we can have in Penta, I have this histrionic way to talk, but one important point is that, for example, sometimes the person has a situation in Penta generating crisis, growth crisis. But especially at the beginning of Penta, either before starting the practice or after, the person can face this crisis. And this is logical because the person will assist people from her past. And this assistance has to do with the weak traits, with her weak traits. And according to this resonance with the concepts, this will affect her. It's not necessarily always this situation. We should not generalize. But when I was preparing myself to start Penta, I had many crises, immaturity crisis. And I went to talk to Valente, and sometimes he used to say things very impactful for us. And he said, well, this may happen at the beginning when you decide, when you think about starting Penta, you see your weak traits very clearly. And he was saying, this often happens. And he looked at me and he said, always, always. And so there is a tendency to see that very often, in a general sense, we can have a general tendency to have to see the weak traits clearly when we start Penta. So at this stage, at the beginning, conscientiotherapy can help a lot and has helped a lot of people. I can say this because we see this very often when we have Penta practitioners at OIC. So in your answer, we have another question. Can you comment and share with us how was your process from the beginning until you became a veteran Penta practitioner? What was more important? Well, for me, some important aspects were, well, I will not answer the process regarding Penta, but regarding the process of conscientiotherapy. To get mature helped me a lot. I became more flexible. I interacted with the helpers. When I was just a psychologist, I worked at IIPC, and at that time, I could see many aspects to be developed, and conscientiotherapy helped me a lot. So, in my case, was the maturity that conscientiotherapy helped me to develop. I was very rigid with some things. I'm still, but I improved a lot. People who got to know me at that time know very well what I'm talking about. So you need to be flexible in terms of your interassistance. Otherwise, you will not be able to help other people. So in my case, conscientiotherapy helped me to qualify the Penta process. But you should identify your assistential pillars, the tasks, the interassistential tasks you must do. In my case, was conscientiotherapy, teaching, and writing verdicts. This was very important. And then I have Penta and the group comment predators book. And I hope I helped you somehow. And another aspect, helping is the experience with Penta and qualification the whole time. So we have one question from Isilda. When we reach the self-diagnose and look for overcoming, how the conscientiotherapy happens? How? Well, you have self-confrontation. After self-diagnose, you need to go through self-confrontation. This is a must in order to reach self-overcome. But all this overcoming process is relative. You start making this interassistential movement, but sometimes you did not go so deep inside your aspects. And this is like a continuous movement going backwards and forward, and things become less stronger than before, but somehow it's still present. So in clinical conscientiotherapy, we prescribe a lot some specific tasks according to her or his conscientiotherapeutic process, to take actions. There is one moment in conscientiotherapy that the evolution has the ball in front of him and he has to kick the ball. So the responsibility is up to him or to her. The action has to be taken by the person. And the helpers create an atmosphere of theater, or somehow this expectation that this is your turn, it's your responsibility, it's your turn to go ahead with your process. I think you answered. And in this spiral movement you mentioned, we can correlate with the target public, target audience we have in our Penta. Sometimes we think that we have recycled one trait, but then we realize that there is still one layer to be taken. And this comes from this perception during the practice of Penta. I think this can be maybe an indicator of recycling. Well, it's important to say that these people, we have brought things together. We have to recompose, we have to do something about it. When we have this interassistential line or guideline, refers to things we did in the past, and it can be very far away, and now we try to make it right. So do we still have questions? Yes, we still have 11 questions. So Rafael is asking, you talked about proud. Which traits closer to this you could list? Well, you have this proud interfering in your manifestation, and there are some other traits very similar. For example, apart from being proud, we have, for example, egoism. The person is thinking about herself only, and this makes forgiveness very difficult. We see very often with people here in our community the level of intraphysicality. And the people basing their interests only at the interphysical dimension, this affects many people, including our colleagues from our community. So the person thinks only in intraphysical problems about money and other things, and the focus is only this. I saw the correlation between these aspects. Although things are independently, they affect each other. So I see correlation in these situations. And many other weak traits can affect our performance. We could stay here for the whole day discussing about this. Recently, I'm reading a biography of some personalities, leaders in the Malaise in the past. I'm not talking about them to avoid evocations, but these personalities, they were aware that they would lose in a context of war, but they did not stop because they wanted to have certain advantages to negotiate afterwards. So the person had a premise that she should not stop because she wanted or he wanted to have a better position for negotiation. So I see that reconciliation goes through this process. So forgiveness and reconciliation. If the person wants to be in a good position, and from this concept, this is very difficult. So we still have other questions. Less competent, least competent, but most important piece of Penta sounds like a lot of pressure. How to deal with performance anxiety during Penta? So I'm talking about pressure. I'm sorry, but I will not alleviate this pressure. I'm sorry. This is the pressure about responsibility. So I think what matters is how you face the pressure. I used to bother myself a lot about pressure. And this was something difficult for me. And I was waiting for the moment this pressure would go away. But I'm sorry to tell you, there will always be pressure. And if you don't have this pressure, something is wrong. If you are not disturbing the intruders, something is wrong. But all this can be faced without anxiety. So you have to learn how to deal with anxiety. There are many techniques to help us. Valente used to talk about physical immobility, and there is a laboratory here at CEAEC just for that. And even the conscientiotherapy can help people to provide some tools for the person to use. So I'm not able to answer your question completely, but I can see the way we deal with anxiety with many groups. And this also can be related to control, the pathological need to control. All anxiety will fit on this? No, you have to see your situation, your context, to see how it is. But many times we see anxiety related to control. But the person has to see her own case and to identify what is prevailing. And if you have anxiety reaching a level of panic, you should search for professional help. This is okay. And if the person has these panic attacks, the person needs help. She needs to search for professional help, and this is quite okay. If something is changing your life, if you fear, for example, animals or injections or something like that, or in closed places, or in this case, the person needs help. And this is perfectly okay. You can search for conscientiotherapy or psychotherapy the way you can. the condition available to you. We still have one question here. How can we evaluate if in our Penta, when we have very often consciences, how can we identify if they come from the connection with our helper or from amarotic guides? Well, when we talk about amarotic guide, this is not Penta. Penta is should flow. Some people don't understand this concept of flowing. It's a practice flowing without bad consequences, without hangover. If you feel bad afterwards, something is wrong. So after Penta, the ideal situation is to feel good, is to feel happy, is to feel with a certain level of overcoming. And Nadia Nara is the one who asked the question. So this is an intraconsciential aspect. How do you feel? And of course, extra-physical helpers will not, well, extra-physicality will not bring conscience to be assisted. The ones able to do this are the helpers. The amarotic guides will not bring this to your Penta, because this is not the aim of Penta. But of course, if the person is linked to a religious line for a long time, and the person accessed conscientiology and left this religious line and start Penta, well, the people from this religion, this person was involved, will come to her Penta, but to be assisted. This is inevitable. Inevitable. This assistance. There is no way to escape from this. So thank you. We have one comment. And we have one question, Josephine. Deviations, intermittent deviations in Penta from daily demands can be, can we overcome this by changing the time of our Penta during late night, for example, or early in the morning? Yes, this can be the case. It will depend on the person. Deviations during Penta can be because of physical tiredness. Maybe the person is very tired and starts Penta, and normally this person will sleep. So this is not best condition. So it's better to sleep, to wake up in a good shape, and then to do Penta. In my case, I had these periods. I work very much better during the night. And everyone should look at their circadian cycle to define the best time for Penta. And this should be the time you feel well, you are okay. In my case, I need to do it in the night. Even if I'm tired, it's the best time for me. Considering all aspects, at the end, I conclude that it's better during the night, late in the night. But everyone should evaluate.
Okay, so I have also a suggestion here that sometimes the person needs to have a personal evaluation. Sometimes the person can experiment and they can actually separate a time in the day or at night to get the responses that they need for the experiences they had during the day. So I started to use the technique of the group karmic predators, and the application of this technique helped me with all the conscientiotherapeutic appointments. Another comment. Please amplify the item. The donation of energies. Does it happen even if the practitioner is not feeling the energies? Yes, it does happen. The qualification of the assisted has a variable. Sometimes you will not see the assisted because sometimes we don't have the maturity. We're not mature enough to actually see them. So there are certain circumstances that either for a lack of maturity or incompetence, or sometimes it's not important for us to remember things from our past. So in this context, yeah, sometimes it's not even recommended to actually see these things. These things are, in my perspective, they are independent. So independent of feeling the energies and seeing the assistant, the practitioner will know if their Penta is going well or not. So in the beginning, there are some times that the person don't feel anything, don't see anything, but it's important to insist instead of just stopping. The most important point is actually asking themselves, what is actually making me be stuck in my parapsychic aspects, traits? And like, for example, if a person doesn't even does the vibrational state in a daily basis. There are some people that may even blame the helpers, blame the assisted. This is the easy way. And it's very serious in terms of consequences. So sometimes you have to look at this like you're actually opening a clinic. And if the clinic actually has a lot of people being assisted with a lot of appointments and everything, and then you decide to close that clinic, it will cause you a lot of problems. It will not have good consequences for you. So, folks, Penta is for the whole life, the entire life. Everybody will tell you this, and it's worth remembering, okay? If you start practicing Penta, and then because you're not feeling anything, you're not seeing anything, you stop. You can't stop. So there, you have to start from this premise. Even if I don't feel anything, even if I don't see anything, it doesn't matter. I have to keep doing it. I can't stop.
Vamos para outra. Juliana Costa pergunta.
So another question, Juliana Costa is asking,
o mal-estar pode estar
in the
relacionado
technique
com a
of the
necessidade evolutiva da pessoa, algo que ela precisa superar.
when I'm not feeling well, is it possible to ignore? And yes, it is possible to ignore the feelings, the if you're feeling bad. So sometimes it happens that the person is actually realizing some aspects, and they can realize that it is important and actually focus on that. So sometimes I've done that before. We may not pay attention to some things and underestimate them. And oh, this is not important right now. I'm not gonna give enough attention to this. And then in the future, it will bite you. It is very important to actually realize every single aspect.
Vamos para a pergunta da Gisele Souza.
So Gisele Souza, I'm grateful for the class.
Quais pontos considera prioritários
What
a serem
aspects or priorities to be analyzed in the self-diagnosis, self-conscientiotherapy by the person that is practicing the inversion technique? Some things are very important. There are three actually very important. Your home, and the financial aspect, and evolutionary dual. When I read the Penta manual, I decided I wanted to actually do the technique. 6 months after reading the manual, everything happened. I didn't have before. A nice place to live, a partner, and an evolutionary dual partner, or financially I wasn't doing well, but everything actually happened in 6 months. And I had a projection with a helper, and he said, September is very far away. You have to start in June. They gave me a date. He showed me in the calendar, start in June. So I see that basic things in life are very important to prioritize. So if you have to choose one most important thing to actually take care of before you start practicing Penta, is the affectivity and sexuality. But it can actually vary from person to person. So I've seen people that started Penta and the person wasn't actually didn't have these aspects very organized in their lives. They had to start Penta, and then they organized them afterwards. So we have to analyze the situation. There is an advice that we can give you. There are several magazines and journals where we actually refer to these aspects of the Penta. And I, for instance, wrote an article about it. I was supposed to start my Penta in 1 year, and actually I anticipated and it started in 6 months. So another question is, How was your preparation for starting your Penta? So I've already responded that, but my important crisis that I went through before I started Penta, they happened prior to my 6 months. As soon as you start thinking about, I am going to start, or I am going to start thinking about starting Penta, then the people come. The people that need assistance, they will come. But it varies from person to person. And for me, being a teacher, a conscientiological teacher, was actually the most important thing that qualified my Penta. So in 1998, I was teaching in several places other than my hometown. And that was actually the most important thing I did from the perspective of my parapsychic aspect. So the helpers is like they are preparing a camp for you, and they will move along with you from camp to camp when you are teaching. So before my Penta, what helped me a lot was giving a lot of classes. Even being a very rigid person, this helped me tremendously.
Ok, então posso continuar
Okay,
aqui,
so
Sônia?
can I continue here, Sonia?
Bom, a
Okay.
Débora Leite. Professor Ivo,
Débora
nas
Leite.
trocas de amparador da Tenepes, é possível
When
acesso ao holopensene de novo amparador indique à consciência tenepsista os traços a serem trabalhados em termos autoconsciencioterápicos?
when changing helpers in the Penta practice, is it possible to actually change our vicinity? Yes, it is possible. We can't generalize. We have to see the context and case by case. I don't have an example very clear about changing in helpers in my Penta. In this process, I still work very hard to have my own vicinity resonant with the helper. Sometimes I have some visits, some helpers visit me, but I don't actually have the need to say that my helper changed. It could be incompetence on my part. It could be, but I'm not sure. My hypothesis is that me and my helper, that we did a lot of silly mistakes in the past, because we've been together in my Penta practice for a long time, for the longest time. We have 2 minutes, and I apologize for not answering all the questions that we have here. Very good explanations, but in an analogous way, can you give me an example of the relationship between the functioning Penta and, well, in my case, I have a few examples, and some gave me indicators that the thing was actually like that. I was with instructor Marina Tomas. We were speaking with some participants online. And all of a sudden, I started thinking about the group karmic creditors. And once I started intraconscientially starting to think about this, about the creditors, and then all of a sudden, I had a sensation. It wasn't clairvoyance itself, but I had the feeling that the room was full of people, of creditors from my past. That gave me such motivation, because when you realize that something that you're thinking or you're doing something, and then there is a confirmation. So it was accompanied by energetic showers. Maybe there are some other things that I need to work on myself, but this was something that was really important. The group karmic creditors, the technique, to me, when I started having these power perceptions, I realized that I was having confirmations. I'd like to thank you all, everybody, all the participants, the teams, technical teams, especially Ms. Luisa Barbosa, everybody that was asking questions, everybody that was listening.
17º, né? Fórum da Tenepes.
I appreciate a lot. We thank you, Ivo Valente, and congratulations for your presentation.
Os últimos recados para você que está nos assistindo no YouTube e não fez a sua inscrição e tem interesse em participar do Fórum da Tenepes, você pode fazer a sua inscrição pelo site do CEAEC.org. Entra, nós vamos dar 5 minutinhos, né, para vocês fazerem as suas inscrições e já retornamos. Então, em 5 minutos,
In 5 minutes, we are going to continue